Welcome to Graham Kerr's Kitchen. It's really two programs in one. This is a series that appeals to your creative side. Food that is sumptuous stuff. How could that be? This is a program about people who want to eat healthy and reduce calories. Actually, it's about food with an aromatic quality that fills the nose. Oh, sure. But it's also about keeping my arteries clean by reducing fat. But it doesn't mean a thing if the food isn't rich and colorful. Maximize the flavor. Okay, but I must have healthy food that I can cook in minutes. I must minimize the risk. So welcome to Graham Kerr's Kitchen, where we get our heads together just for you. Hey, welcome back. Well, today, just the same as normal, what I'm going to do with all that stuff that you've just seen is to actually have a basic technique here, first of all, just in the first part, and then go on to that and do another dish, which is what I call springboarding. You know, some way of taking a basic concept and then bouncing on it and doing your own thing with the idea. So I think perhaps to look at this from this point of view, first of all, is kind of interesting. There is a way in which you get particles of fat which are sort of combined or married together with particles of flour, and when that happens, it's called altogether a roux in French parlance. And so you combine the two together, and when you actually combine them properly, what you get is 6 times the amount of water or liquid can go into this and be supported by that mix. Well, that's fine, and it tastes wonderful. Come on, I know it does. But if you're in the business of actually withdrawing a bit from fat, that becomes a bit of a problem. So we have to look at ways of actually thickening things without having to have so much fat around. So today, that's what it's all about. And the first time, it will be that simple little technique. It's just using pure starches instead of flour. And then the next time, we'll do a bistro dish for you, which is great stuff. Actually, it's one of the nicest dishes I've ever done. Come through. All right, number one, just to sort of throw in a little bit of an extra for you on rice, I've got some boiling water here, and I'm going to put in just 1/8 of a teaspoonful of salt. Have you ever noticed how, you know, people say just 1/8 of this, 1/8 of that, and it's hard to know how to measure things like that? Well, what I do is I've got just a little, and I hook them together to so we can go adrift. And I've got a little bit of this salt, and that's 1/8 teaspoon. That's a 1/4 teaspoon. It doesn't go down to 1/8 teaspoon. And that amount of salt in the water is actually enough to bring that rice out of being totally bland. You know, it may not be as much as you'd like, but it is enough to get just that lift. All right, water boils, oh, don't touch that one. It's the wrong one. Water boils, and just stir it around a couple of times, because when it's on a hot, really hot element underneath it, what can happen is the rice sort of says, oh, I don't want to go up in the air. I want to lie here and do my own thing. And it cakes onto the bottom, and it can burn. And in this way, when you stir it around, it's just fine. Put a lid on the top, gets the heat going quickly, and rings it up. Now, I just want 10 minutes at the boil, and then I'll show you a little technique which goes with that. Okay, this is a large wok with a flat bottom, because this is electric, of course, and it's cast aluminum, so that it actually, or aluminium, hello, and it distributes the heat well. Now, but if you don't have one of these, if you've got a skillet and it's big flat bottom and it's got a fairly large lip to it, then you can use one of those in place. So, okay. And if not, you can use a frying pan and get stuff all over the curve. Here we go. Just 1 teaspoonful of oil on the top, and then because it's vegetables as well, remember that's normal, just 1 other teaspoonful in order to marry it up. Just 2 teaspoons of oil, which is a light olive oil, and a bit of toasted sesame seed oil, about 1/16 part. Okay, this is standard stuff that I normally do. Now you see, this has now come to the boil. The moment that it comes to the boil, take the lid off, and let the rice breathe. Good smell there. First of all then, clove of garlic, just a nice fat clove of garlic. That's the bash and chop business. It's got a sharp blade on it so that you can actually bash it and chop it, and that just does fine in a dish. It really does. Then here's an interesting fellow. You know what this is? It's not a gladioli. This is ginger. This is root ginger. And it's a perfectly wonderful specimen here. When they're very young, a root ginger can be almost bronze in color with a very fine, papery skin. And sometimes you can, go through this process that I've done, which is to remove the skin from it altogether. It's not strictly necessary. I need to have 8 paper-thin slices. And then, by the way, this green here is the... This is probably edible. This is the pen that I was marking with. It's just that I'm concerned about it, just in case you thought I had dirty hands. It's not that, it's just me pen. Here we go. And they're in very fine, thin slices, which is called julienne by some people. Tiny little whispers, and it should be whisper because you get a big hunk of that and you really know it. So I'm going to use both of those ingredients at the same time in the oil that's here. This is, by the way, is really doing its thing, isn't it? Turn that down just a little bit, that 10-minute rice. And in goes that. Now, we're going to deal with this later on in the series about baoziang. But this is what's happening now. There is this explosion of fragrance taking place there in the pan. And it shouldn't go on too long, because if it goes on too long, if you look down in that pan now, you see it's beginning to toast. That's long enough. Then put in, I've got 1 green pepper there, which is cut into fairly obvious, interesting size. I always cut, by the way, a red pepper or a green pepper, which of course, as you know, red pepper is really a green pepper that's hung around long enough, and into slices from the inside, not the outside of the pepper. You see, on the outside of a pepper is quite hard, but the inside is nice and soft, and you're unlikely to sort of do yourself damage if you do it that way. Right? So, put that in with that. That's just 8 ounces of pepper. And by the way, I usually mention all the ingredients, so if you've got a piece of paper and a pencil, just write it down. If you don't, there's always the book. All right, so, now you see that? I just gave it a little stir, but you see how that caked in the bottom there? That's just what I don't want. So just make sure that it's off the bottom of the pan. Marvelous when things like that happen. All right, going well. Here are 8 ounces of snow peas. Now, please don't get the frozen snow peas. They don't do well at all. Wait for them to be fresh. And then just take that little stalk end off the top there. Those can be thrown in after everything's been going for a while. If you've got a couple of wooden spoons, this is fine. I like using these things. They let all the juices flow through the hole. And just keep it going. It's quite a high heat now, medium-high, never anything more than medium-high for me. And that's marvelous smell. Okay, now, when it's got to about this point here, just take the vegetables and pop them onto a plate. Now, we've got an almost dry pan. But here's some of the toasted sesame oil, just 1/4 teaspoonful of it. It's unrefined toasted sesame oil, and it's just a wonderful, wonderful flavor. And to this, 12 ounces of a jumbo scallop. Now, I know they're a little bit expensive, but look, there's no skin, no bones, and sometimes you look at the prices of other things and other protein, and you work out how much you actually get to eat. And this is a remarkably good buy. And they're so tender. These are the weather vane scallops from Alaska. They're perfect, and they're just tossed around in there. A little bit of salt, just a touch, and a little pepper. I actually wanted pepper. And whilst those are just cooking there just for a moment or two, look at this. This, I think, after fresh basil, or basil, is my favorite herb. Now, what's that? Okay. See, that's a good way of looking at it, like that. That is cilantro. And cilantro is fabulous. With a little thin knife like this, cut it through so that there are discernible chunks of it, not totally fine, but I want actually 2 tablespoons of it altogether. So I just throw that in on the top and just turn those. You see, they've just browned a little bit, and this it's outrageous. The sesame and the cilantro together. Fabulous. All right, now take the vegetables and whack them back in again. Now, I make a very simple stock. I'll tell you about it later in the program. But I make a very simple stock out of vegetables. And that is it. Just 1 cupful of it. And I usually make quite a large amount of it and then freeze it down and then use it when I want it. Small amount of white wine, just to, well, you know me. It's just a nice thing to do. And then wine, this is where you need to get the heat up. Now, this is where the technique comes in. If you were to serve it like this and you were to pop the scallops back in again, it's thin. It looks nice, but it's thin. And now sometimes in Asian cooking, a whole mess of oil goes on to that. Let me see that I've got that underneath. Good. And I want to try and avoid the oil. So here is the technique. In this, I've got some cornstarch. I have found that arrowroot, which is fine for adding tremendous stuff. I love arrowroot. But when it's put with vegetables, which are like this, which are just crisp as can be, they really don't work. Arrowroot comes off feeling slimy. And this cornstarch can be poured into the top and stirred around. It thickens up almost instantaneously. See how quick that is? Just like that. But it does need about 30 seconds, all right, just to cook out the starch. Because although it's a pure starch, there's this kind of a feeling of starch in there. And you can actually sort of discern it. Oh, that's great. So this is in the 30 seconds. Take a plate, and we can get out some rice, which, by the way, I put into a strainer out of there after 10 minutes, and then just let that sort of make, look how beautiful that rice is. That just has another 5 to 10 minutes in a strainer over some hot water like that, and then all you have to do is just to pull out the perfectly thickened with pure starch stir fry like that. Doesn't it look wonderful? It works every time. Well, now you see, one of the things that happens here is that you get this glistening finish out of it. And it really looks colorful. You've got the color and the plump, just cooked scallops. Scallops should never be cooked so that they go sort of woodeny, you know, they're cooked just to develop a wonderful flavor. Now, did we achieve it? Instead of having the roux, the solid-based roux with, the 5 tablespoonfuls of flour and the 4 tablespoonfuls of butter and the cream and the cheese and everything else which makes up the dish. Instead of that, we just had a couple of teaspoons full of oil, just a 1/4 teaspoon on top of the sesame oil. So that results in a really intriguing set of numbers, because what you see, right off the top, you get down to 493 calories. And then, after the calories, you watch the fat, okay? So from 31 grams of fat now goes down to 5, and only 1 of those grams of fat is actually saturated, which is very good news. So that results in a total, then, of 9% of calories from fat. Then we get 27 grams of cholesterol and 250 milligrams of sodium, and just down to the end with just 4 grams of fiber, which is just an increase anyway, which is really good stuff. Okay, now, quick little taste here. I adore scallops. Sorry about this one. Yeah. Oh, and the flavor and the basking basking of that sauce that runs over the top of it. It's so smooth, and you just pick up the flavor of the ginger, and a little bit of the garlic there as well. Ready to go. So, don't forget, springboard. Use the idea, the pure starch, the cornstarch with the fresh vegetables like that one. Okay? Springboard. Oh, I'm going to springboard this time with a classic French dish. This is a sort of bistro dish, and really works. It's terrific. I guess really the first thing about this, boy, the smell, I lifted the lid and the smell is amazing. Aroma, I'm sorry. Here I've got mushrooms, and they're quite small mushrooms, really, about an inch across, and try and get them equal sized. And if you're going to clean them at all, clean them with a damp cloth. Don't run them under water and then use them straight away, because otherwise they get slimy. All right. I've got actually 8 ounces of mushrooms, and I'll show you how to do the rest of the dish in a moment. I just wanted to stir these in whilst I still had about 5-6 minutes for them, just for the mushroom to remain meaty and great, but to just sort of steam through with the rest of those vegetables in there. Fabulous. All right. Now, the onion, which goes into this dish, is a small pickling size onion. Now, all of the vegetables are kept almost the same size. Great classic dishes like this of the people. Usually meant taking the vegetables out of the soil just at the springtime and assembling all these great, gorgeous things from the garden, all at that prime moment of excellence, and assembling them together. That's why the sort of presentation is so important. So I simply take those and cut those into quarters. They retain their size, as you can see. And this then is placed with the others. There are about 6 of those onions altogether. And then here, place 1 teaspoonful of oil into the pan. Wind the pan up medium-high, no higher than that. And then just drop the onions in there, and they can start to sizzle just a little. Have you noticed in the markets nowadays, I hope where you are, that this is happening, little tiny truncated carrots, they're called French carrots. What I do with these is just to cut those in half. To expose the surface of the inside to be able to absorb some of the flavors that we're going to create around this one. Really good. So with this one, I've got 20 of the small carrots. And what's so nice about them is they're so sweet. They've got a lovely, sweet, tender quality. I know we've sort of fixated by things that are long, great big carrots. My, look at that carrot, it's 12 inches long. Well, I'm not sure that just naturally feels that the carrot is the best carrot that you can buy. All right, there it is. And now small new potatoes, the little red skin new potatoes, so nice, again, that come just out in the spring. And I suppose all the year round now, you get everything from some place that get blown in. These are about 6 of those potatoes. I didn't want too much starch in the dish. And start stirring those in as well. The onions are releasing that natural volatile oil now, and the rest of the vegetables are just doing nicely, just being able to simmer gently. Okay, there's a herb which is absolutely vital, or herb if you will, absolutely vital in this dish, and it's called rosemary. And rosemary is absolutely magnificent. I would take about 4 inches of rosemary. It came like this, so I'm having to put 2 branches in. But just settle those down in the dish. Wherever rosemary grows in abundance, the woman is in charge of the house. So you might like to plant some and tell Dad about it. Or on the other hand, be like me, and I nip out at night time and kill the stuff. So stir it around, and then just liberally douse it with 2 cups full of vegetable stock. Now, vegetable stock is dead easy, truly dead easy. You just put a little oil in the bottom of the pan, get some garlic and some fresh root ginger, some leek and turnip, onion and celery and carrot, a bit of parsley. and just simmer that away in a pan and strain it. It takes about half an hour. I usually do a great big batch and then freeze some in a pouch bag and stick it in the fridge with a mark it, make sure everybody knows what it is. Now, when you lift the lid, you will immediately sense this tremendously exciting aroma of the rosemary. And I've got here some arrowroot. Now, in the first program, or first part of the program, I actually used cornstarch, okay, because of the vegetables, and the vegetables were crisp. Where vegetables are crisp, you simply cannot use arrowroot because it goes slimy. I don't know any other way of describing it but slimy. But in this case, the vegetables are cooked. Now, move them to one side and then pour this, what is called a slurry, of the arrowroot. Now, you notice the arrowroot goes so quickly. Do you notice how quickly that has actually thickened? Now, you can pour that 2 tablespoonsful, so about a tablespoonful and a half, actually. It's usually the ratio is 1 tablespoonful of pure starch to 8 ounces of liquid that you want to, oh gosh, this is so great, that you want to thicken. Now, that's what I want. Now, look at how colorful that has become. The thing you should do before you stir it all around is take the rosemary out. I've belted all the leaves off the rosemary now, so now you've got little rosemary leaves, and they're too spiky to stay in. So, the first thing is take it out before you start knocking off the little spiky bits. All right, good. There's a couple of other herbs, if you don't mind, herbs that I'd like to put in. One is, first of all, butter beans. These are canned butter beans, or red or lima beans. Unfortunately, manufacturers nowadays are not aware of the fact that we need to have beans whole. I just want to get those down to warm them up. Don't put them in too early, otherwise they'll lose their shape and they'll break up. They actually put in far too much salt, and I'd really like to ask you, please, if you manufacture beans, and even if you don't tell somebody who does, please let's have one with lower salt content. All right, so that's doing well, and then a little bit, about a half a teaspoonful of thyme, and about a tablespoonful of parsley on the top, and you've done it. Now that really couldn't be easier, could it, actually? Well, I suppose it could, but I mean, I can't think how it could. Then you just simply serve it up. Now look at how it glistens, all right? And there's no stringiness, which there would have been if I had used, it in fresh, those raw vegetables. These go wonderfully well. Looks magnificent. The aroma from that is just tremendous, all right? So there it is. Now let's have a look at the numbers and show you just how it compares with the one with cheese on it. Because that's the way that it's normally achieved in the classic European style, which is this one here. You'll notice that this one has this gloss and glimmer, and it looks as if it has fat maybe on it. Whereas this one does not have the same gloss glimmer, and it has a lot of cheese on the top surface. Very attractive and very pleasant dish, but it's not quite the same. Let me show you how they actually compare numbers-wise. Mine goes up a bit in terms of calories, but don't always worry about that because it's the next number that makes the difference, you see. 24 grams versus 3, and only 1 of which is saturated, which means I get that whole dish with only 6% of calories from fat, which is really neat, with no cholesterol in it. But 533, that's the sodium content because of those butter beans. You might like to actually do your own beans. By the way, notice what a wonderful increase in fiber there is there. That's just a great thing and shows you how if you get into fresh vegetables and beans as well, what a magnificent, true, genuine delight it all is. Please do that one. You'll minimize risk and maximize flavor like nothing you've done perhaps in your whole life. God bless you. See you next time. Okay?